The winter wind tore across the high plains like a living thing, clawing at the empty fields and whispering through the broken fence posts as if the land itself was mourning. Beneath a gray, unfeeling sky, a woman staggered along the dirt road, her boots worn thin, her coat patched so many times it barely held warmth anymore. Clara Whitmore had not eaten properly in days. Hunger had become a constant ache, no longer sharp but deep, like something hollowing her from the inside. In her arms, she carried her 6-year-old daughter, Ellie, whose small face was pale and too quiet for a child her age. Ellie's head rested against her mother's shoulder, her breath shallow, each exhale fogging the cold air. Clara's husband had died the previous spring when a wagon wheel shattered and crushed him beneath its weight. The ranch owner he worked for paid his final wages and offered a prayer, but prayers didn't buy bread, and grief didn't keep a roof from collapsing. One by one, Clara lost everything, the rented cabin, the sewing work in town, even the neighbors who once promised help but slowly turned away when they realized her need would not end quickly. Now, she walked with nowhere left to go, every step a question she had no answer for. Miles away, Jacob Cole leaned against the fence of his ranch, watching the cattle move sluggishly across the frosted pasture. He was a tall man with a weathered face, the kind shaped by sun and hard decisions. At 38, he was known as the quiet rancher who never married, the man who worked from before dawn until long after dark and spoke only when words were necessary. Folks in town said he preferred it that way, that solitude suited him. They didn't know about the nights he sat alone at his table, staring at an empty chair, or the letter folded and refolded in his pocket from a woman who had once promised forever before choosing another life. Jacob had built his ranch with his own hands after losing his parents to illness, and self-reliance had become both his strength and his shield. He didn't look for trouble or charity, but that afternoon, something caught his eye down the road, 2 figures moving slowly, unsteadily, like they might collapse at any moment. At first, Jacob thought it was his imagination, but as the figures drew closer, his jaw tightened. He recognized desperation when he saw it. He grabbed his coat and strode toward the gate, boots crunching against frozen earth. Clara barely noticed him at first, her vision blurred, and every sound felt distant. It wasn't until Ellie stirred weakly and whispered, "Mama, I'm cold," that Clara stopped, her knees threatening to give out. Jacob reached them just in time, instinctively taking Ellie from Clara's arms. The child was frighteningly light. Clara tried to protest, but the words wouldn't come. Shame flooded her, shame at being seen like this, at needing help, at failing her child. Jacob didn't ask questions. He draped his coat around Ellie and motioned toward his ranch. "You'll freeze out here," he said quietly. "Come inside." Inside the ranch house, warmth wrapped around them like a forgotten memory. Jacob set Ellie near the fire and brought soup from the stove, his movements steady, practiced. Clara sat stiffly at the edge of a chair, clutching her hands together as if afraid the floor might vanish beneath her. She watched Ellie sip the soup, color slowly returning to her cheeks, and tears burned her eyes. She hadn't cried since the night her husband died. Crying felt like a luxury she could no longer afford. Jacob noticed her trembling and placed a bowl in front of her. "Eat," he said, not unkindly. Hunger overpowered pride, and she did. When the worst of the hunger passed, Clara finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. She told him everything, about her husband, the debts, the cold nights, the closed doors. She expected judgment, or pity, or worse, an offer of temporary help followed by a polite dismissal. Jacob listened without interruption, his eyes fixed on the fire. When she finished, silence filled the room. Clara stood, panic rising. "Thank you for the food," she said quickly. "We'll go." "I didn't mean to." "Stay," Jacob said. The single word stopped her cold. He turned to face her fully. "You and your daughter can stay. There's work here. Food. Shelter." Relief flooded her, followed immediately by fear. Nothing came without a cost. She had learned that lesson the hard way. "I can't pay much," she said softly. Jacob hesitated, then spoke words that changed everything. "I'm not asking for payment," he said. "I'm asking you to marry me." The room seemed to tilt. Clara stared at him, convinced she had misunderstood. Marriage? To a man she had just met? Her heart pounded as 100 thoughts collided: safety, scandal, survival, dignity. Jacob continued, his voice steady but strained. "I need a wife to help run this place. Folks will stop asking questions. Your daughter will have a home. This would be practical." Practical. The word hurt more than she expected. Yet as Clara looked at Ellie, now asleep by the fire, warmth finally in her limbs, she knew practicality might be the only luxury left to her. Still, fear clawed at her chest. "You don't even know me," she said. Jacob met her gaze. "I know you walked miles in the cold for your child," he replied. "That's enough." That night, Clara lay awake in the small guest room, listening to the wind outside and the steady ticking of the clock. Marriage had once meant love, laughter, shared dreams. Now it was a lifeline thrown across a freezing river. She didn't know if she could accept it, or if she had any right to refuse. As dawn crept through the window, Clara realized one thing with terrifying clarity: saying no might mean returning to the road, to hunger, to watching her daughter fade away one cold night at a time. And so, with a heart full of fear and a fragile spark of hope, she prepared to give Jacob Cole her answer. Morning arrived quietly over the ranch, pale sunlight stretching across the fields and slipping through the windows as if unsure whether it was welcome. Clara sat at the small kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a tin cup of coffee that had long gone cold. She had not slept. All night, Jacob's words echoed in her mind: "I'm asking you to marry me." It felt unreal, like a sentence borrowed from someone else's life. Across the room, Ellie slept on a narrow bed Jacob had set up near the hearth, her breathing slow and peaceful in a way Clara had not heard for weeks. That alone felt like a miracle. When Jacob entered the room, already dressed for the day, hat in hand, Clara stood as if summoned by an unseen force. He didn't rush her. He didn't repeat the offer. He simply waited, giving her the dignity of choice. At last, Clara spoke, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "I won't pretend this is love," she said. "But if you'll promise my daughter safety and kindness, I'll do my best to be a good wife." Jacob nodded once, a quiet understanding passing between them. "That's all I ask," he replied. The wedding was small, almost invisible. A preacher from town came out the following Sunday, the words spoken in Jacob's living room while the wind rattled the windows. There were no flowers, no music, no guests beyond a curious neighbor who stood witness. Yet when Jacob placed the simple ring on Clara's finger, something inside her shifted, not joy, not yet, but stability. Ellie smiled for the first time in days, tugging at Jacob's sleeve and calling him "sir," until he knelt and told her she could call him "pa" if she wanted. The word struck Clara like a bell, echoing through a future she had not dared imagine. Jacob cleared his throat, turning away so no one would see the sudden moisture in his eyes. Life on the ranch settled into a rhythm. Clara worked hard, harder than she ever had, cooking, cleaning, mending, learning the endless demands of ranch life. Jacob never treated her like hired help. He asked her opinion, listened when she spoke, and slowly, without ceremony, began to trust her. Ellie followed Jacob everywhere, chattering about birds and clouds, her laughter slowly filling the empty spaces of the ranch house. But the town did not forget so easily. Whispers followed Clara whenever she rode in with Jacob for supplies. Some said she trapped him, others said she married him for survival, not love. Each word cut deep, reopening wounds of pride and shame. Jacob heard the rumors too. One evening, after a long day, Clara finally broke, tears spilling as she confessed her fear of being nothing more than a burden. Jacob listened in silence, then said something that changed everything. "I asked you because I needed you," he said. "Not because I pitied you. This place was empty before you came. Winter deepened, testing them all. A brutal storm swept across the plains, trapping Jacob miles away with the cattle. Clara waited through the night, fear gnawing at her as the wind howled like a living beast. When Jacob finally staggered in at dawn, half frozen and injured, Clara worked without hesitation, tending his wounds, keeping him alive through sheer determination. As she sat beside him through the long hours, something unfamiliar bloomed in her chest, not obligation, not gratitude, but love, slow and undeniable. When Jacob finally woke and saw her there, he reached for her hand, holding it as if afraid she might disappear. No words were needed. Spring arrived softer than expected. The land healed, and so did they. Clara found herself smiling without effort, laughing with Jacob over small things, watching Ellie grow strong and fearless. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in gold, Jacob stood beside Clara on the porch. "I never thought I'd have a family," he admitted quietly. Clara leaned into him, realizing the truth at last: they had saved each other. What began as survival had become something far greater: belonging. And if you're still watching this story, remember this: sometimes help arrives in the most unexpected form, and sometimes love grows not from romance, but from kindness, patience, and shared hardship. If stories like this move your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and stay with us, because every story we share is a reminder that hope can rise even from the coldest ground.